Hi, man. I was just
Hi,
like, IG lives are so weird because you've got to make small talk with yourself until the other person joins.
I know, it's bizarre, isn't it? It's like seeing yourself and then
It is
having
really
talked to
bizarre.
yourself.
Yeah. And I'm like, how's everyone's lockdown? It's just bizarre, isn't it?
Well,
Hi, lovely to see you.
you too, you got the purple memo.
I got the perps memo. I've targeted my inner fierce woman with my target earrings. I'm ready.
I love it, babe. I do love your earring
Thanks.
collection, I must say.
Yeah, I've got quite the jewelry collection. These are actually handmade from Mexico.
Oh, there's
So,
times when we
yeah,
could travel.
I know. Let's not go there, hey?
Yeah.
Hey, thanks so much for joining and welcome back. We're doing womb talks. This is our second womb talks after our first one. It was probably a month ago now, I reckon, where we spoke about the not so normal periods, and it went really well, and we had such great feedback from womb talks, so much so that we basically decided to run a September long month series. So it's a 4-part series where we're going to be unpacking everything around our cycle, and we're calling it Cycle Awareness Month. So every Monday for the next 4 weeks, or the next 3 weeks after today, we're going to be talking about a different topic on our cycles. And that's really come from the interest and requests from you all. So thank you so much for all your awesome feedback. And we're really excited to be bringing you this series. And, you know, like what more do we have to do anyway? We're all in lockdown, so we basically just tune in and learn about our cycles, right?
Totally.
And so, yeah, I guess I want to touch on a couple of like housekeeping kind of things, and then we'll get straight into it. But just to kind of reiterate what we're doing here and what All Natural Pharmacy is about is we're essentially just debunking all of the myths and talking openly about periods, cycles, and our mission, honestly, is just to educate menstruators globally on their 5th vital sign, our periods, so we can all make better informed health decisions. And, you know, the conversation really starts now by having these open sessions and just sharing knowledge and talking really openly about our cycles. We have a really exciting giveaway, which is only going to last for an extra hour, but we're launching in the month of September, and what we're doing is we're giving away one of each tincture. If all you need to do is basically follow us on Instagram, you need to tag a friend and then hashtag the tincture that you would like, and we'll be drawing the winner in the next 24 hours. We'll DM you with, we'll DM the winners, obviously, and you'll just need to redeem that. So really excited. Make sure that you head and tag your friends on that post after this. Don't leave this to do that. And so today we're going to be chatting about some real base level understanding of our cycles. And I guess, you know, I was reflecting over the topic of understanding your cycle, and Mans, you know this about me too, but it took me until my early to mid 30s to personally realize that I actually didn't know much about my cycle, and I didn't really learn much about my cycle in school. You know, there were some real old school projectors, which we've laughed about, and some like outdated diagrams and some very weird kind of awkward sex ed moments in school. But really, when I think about what we carry through to adulthood, and we go through our lives, we get our periods and as menstruators and each month, right? And we don't actually really know that much about them. We just have our bleed and we move on with life. And so we're really just lacking this knowledge in how we're cyclical beings and how our cycles actually affect our life cycle and our everyday way of being. So we really wanted to kick off this session, and obviously I'll introduce Amanda for those who don't know. This is Amanda Waaldyk, Dr. Amanda Waaldyk, and I also call her the wizard, basically. She's All Natural Pharmacy's founder and just full of knowledge on women's health, menstruators' health, and is all about understanding, helping us kind of unpack understanding our cycle tonight. So thanks so much, Mams, for joining yet again.
Thanks,
I know
lovely.
you just had to fang home from work and pop on some makeup and just quickly join IG Live, so appreciate you taking the time to do it. We're going to get stuck into understanding our cycle tonight, and please do feel free to write any comments, add any questions in the box, and I'll get to them as I can. But I guess we really just wanted to start off by breaking down our cycles. And my first question for you, Maz, would be like, can you give me a step-by-step play of how our cycles work? And like last time you brought out this really great uterus. I'm wondering if you've drawn a diagram this time. I don't know. But basically we just need the step-by-step. Oh, she has. Look at her. Here's something I prepared earlier. You can just give us a play-by-play. I love it, honestly. It's like I can read your mind. She's got a diagram. If you can give us a step-by-step play of how our cycles actually work, that would be awesome.
Well, I think it's always easier when we have a diagram, isn't it? I think we spend so long not actually understanding and disconnected to our bodies that when we can sort of see these diagrams here, a menstrual cycle diagram, thanks, we can actually start to see the hormonal fluctuations and that we are very much hormonal, and that our cycle is based on 4 different phases. And so we have menstruation. That's the time that we bleed, and we can all relate to that because that's very visual. We have our second phase, which is our follicular phase, and this is the time where we recruit a dominant follicle, and we produce the hormone stimulating FSH that basically encourages a dominant follicle to grow. And then we come into our ovulatory phase, and this is the phase that we're deemed most fertile in our cycle. And this is basically, you know, when we're at school, it was like, don't have sex because you'll fall pregnant. But
the old school projector.
The old school projector. And then we have our luteal phase, which is our last phase, our 4th phase. And then we go back into this repeated cycle. And so I guess really there's the main dominant hormones in the arena that are really estrogen and progesterone. And so interestingly enough, in our menstruation phase is that the hormones estrogen and progesterone drop to a base level. And so what happens there is that signals the endometrial lining to start shedding. And so as the endometrial lining starts to shed, which is this little beauty here, the endometrial... That's what we shed. That is actually known as our menstrual blood, and that is what is deemed a period. We then come into our follicular phase, which is where we have the hormone estrogen. Estrogen stimulates our cervical fluid, and our cervical fluid is our fertile fluid. This is what helps sperm to travel and makes our basically our womb nice and fertile. And this is something that's also really visual as well. So for many of you, I don't know whether you've had the opportunity to see your cervical fluid or cervical mucus, but this builds because of the hormone estrogen getting ready for ovulation. So essentially at the end of the day, ladies, our body is really designed to procreate. As some of us, sometimes that's quite hard to hear, but that is, that's our makeup ladies and menstruators. And so as we come into this follicular phase, we also produce the FSH hormone, the follicle stimulating hormone. And this is what encourages a dominant follicle to grow. That reaches maturity. At that time, as we come up into ovulation, which is our mid-cycle phase, the rise in estrogen then causes the luteinizing hormone to surge. And for those that are on their fertility path, is that when you're testing for ovulation and you're using your pee sticks, you'll start to see a flashing smiley. That's encouraging a luteinizing hormone. And as that surges, that then that basically triggers the egg to release, the follicle to release an egg. And then that travels down the fallopian tube. And then we come, as that follicle has released that egg, that then basically morphs into the corpus luteum. And the corpus luteum is this structure here. That's the yellow hormone body. And that's what produces progesterone. And progesterone is to basically support implantation. And that also encourages our endometrial lining to be nice and thick and receptive. And so that's kind of basically it in a nutshell. Okay, and then we have our period again.
Yeah, okay. Now I'm going to just break it down just even further for a second, Amanda, because like that was awesome, but there were some real technical kind of terms in there. So can we just also start with, like, you know, why do we actually call it a cycle?
Yeah.
It's over a period of time. Are there things like, I mean, you did mention kind of ovulation and the egg being released, and is there a certain period of time that we need to consider within that cycle of that time frame as well? Like, I'm just trying to really break it down super simply. Example, right? And my housemate won't mind me saying this, but we chatted the other day and she was like, I didn't even know that there was a window, you know? So
well, this is it, right? So literally for all people out there, there's a 24-hour window. So at ovulation, when we release an egg, you literally have a fertile window of realistically 12 hours, 12 to 24 hours. So you're not actually fertile throughout your entire cycle. You're just fertile around that ovulatory window. And what gets confusing for a lot of women and menstruators is that our cycle varies from length. So we can have a cycle length. And the cycle length is from the first day of your period to the starting next day of your period. And that's what we call a cycle. And so within our cycle length, we have number of cycle days. So each day, so from day 1 to day 5, that is generally considered our menstruation. For anyone that bleeds longer than 5 days, up to 7 to 10 days, that's definitely worth investigating, because remembering that our period is our 5th vital sign, is that our period shares so much information about our overall health, our gynecological health, our menstrual health, and also our reproductive health. So if we're having a period, it means that our body has met its basic level of health for that month. So really important to be actually having a bleed. And then in our follicular phase is normally from day 5 to 14. And that is when we're coming into, and then we get ready for ovulation. Ovulation lasts anywhere from around 14 to 18. And then from 14, we have 2 weeks in our luteal phase. And this is what everyone terms the 2-week wait, particularly when we're on our fertility path. And then the cycle starts again. So if we don't conceive and the embryo doesn't implant into the endometrial lining is what sheds. And this is what we go through every month. It's like a detox, it's a cleanse. It's a letting go of the old. So in Western medicine, they describe it as the debris. So we're like literally, if we haven't conceived, the endometrial lining changes, it remodulates, and it gets ready to shed. And we release inflammation, cytokines, different cells, vaginal secretions. And so this is the time as well that you might see that your period blood does contain cervical mucus in it. So we're at AMP, we're really encouraging you all to take note of what your period likes, just like you do with your poo.
Yeah, and Mans, like, you've just touched on so much that I need to go and unpack further. All around days, obviously, but then you just started to go into this whole, like, the fact that we're cyclical beings and we shed, and you're out with the old and in with the new, and we're going to go into that. I have a question for you, which I'm sure you know the answer, obviously, and so do I, but I'm really kind of curious to know if people in the audience know this, but, like, what day of your cycle are you on at the moment?
So I'm currently day 4.
Yeah.
So everyone, write down what day you are, if you know.
Hey, me too, cycle sister.
Are you?
Yeah. Yeah, I really am. That's brilliant.
See, we start synced. Cycling together. We've synced together. I love it.
Those
and we're in purple.
Together, you know.
We don't live together. Goodness.
I know, but my housemates actually synced with me. Most of my best friends have. Yeah.
Well, and on that note,
it
is a new moon. It's a new moon tomorrow, right?
So tomorrow's a new moon. Let's talk about that. Ren, you're on day 18. That's awesome that you know. Alex, you think you're on day 20. Fantastic. It's good that you know.
It's
Lindsay,
so good 25. That you know.
Yeah, and it is, like, you know, it is really important, like Man said before, just around kind of tracking your cycle. And I think that comes with part of this whole, like, cycle awareness, right? And knowing what day you're at, where you're at, because sometimes
day 8
really might be quite moody. And if you know where you're at, day 8, if you know where you're at in your cycle, you can kind of justify or work out where you're at hormonally as well, you know?
That's right. Because that makes sense. It's like when you're on day 25 or day 20, coming into that 2-week wait, your PMS symptoms start to kick in. You start to notice those changes, those hormonal changes, whether you're getting a little bit of breast tenderness, whether you're starting to get bloated, tired.
It explains it all when you want to just constantly eat a burger and wrap up in a dressing gown, you know.
That's it.
But yeah. So let's talk about, you touched on something great before around kind of like your cycle, and it kind of leads into this cyclical being side of things. But your cycle is all about kind of like shedding the old, in with the new. There's a new moon tomorrow. So can we talk a little bit about this whole like cyclical, rhythmical beings, and like how do we relate that to the cycle? What does that even mean, Mans? And like where do we start with it?
Okay, I guess at the end of the day, we are nature. So we are these cyclical beings, and women follow the seasons just as their cycle does. So we have our inner seasons, and we have winter, which is menstruation. So it's a time of hibernation, a time to really slow down and to honor that process of having your bleed, and a time to really journal. And you'll notice that your energy starts to decrease at that time as well. And it's a really important time also, as you're losing blood and losing energy, to replenish. So to be having lots of nourishing foods, not to be over exercising, just to really be and go within, because menstruation is actually a very spiritual journey. And I think that the Western world that we live in, we've totally lost that connection. And so that's why we're really passionate about, is bringing women and menstruators back into their body so you can understand your own internal rhythm. And then, of course, as we come into our follicular phase, it's spring. So we're producing estrogen. We're feeling a little bit more vibrant. We have more energy. Great time to be kind of, socializing, doing projects. I call it the time where you have your angel wings. You step out. You want to be more connected. You're more connected to yourself as well. And then, of course, we come into ovulation. And just like that, it's like I'm out in summer. So with our hormone, our libido, our energy's up, our mood's up. And of course, our hormones impact our mood. They impact our libido. So if we're not feeling great about ourselves, as we're coming up to ovulation, we're not going to be wanting to connect. We just kind of want to stay in. And then, of course, as we come into our luteal phase, that is the autumn. And so as we step into autumn, the body's prepping for winter again. So coming in for a time of like quietening down. So you've had summer, and that time when we have that change in season and it goes from summer into autumn, we're all shattered.
Yeah, totally.
We're like, it's over.
Yeah, I know. It's the end of the world. I don't want to see anyone. But it just makes so much sense when you really break it down by seasons like that, because if you actually can correlate it to spring and being creative, like I always, for so many years, questioned why after I've shed, for 2 weeks, I feel awesome. And I'm like, I want to see people, I want to interact. And it really does, like our cycles really do impact our lifestyle, right? And so it's so important to know about our cycle and what stage we're at in order to inform our lifestyle. Like you just sort of gave that example of, being really creative in springtime, right? Going inwards when you're dark and getting into winter, like, and understanding that as a real base kind of level knowledge, I think is really important, because it helps us kind of work out when we're best placed to do certain things in our life and in our lifestyle as well.
Completely. So if we can actually, plan our life around our period, then we're so much better off in terms of like for energy, hormonally, cognitively as well. So every time I'm bleeding, like I don't love to be doing Insta lives, right? Because essentially, no, it's like because my blood, we're both doing it. My blood's in my uterus and I just can't think right.
Yeah.
Because also too, I'm really tired. And so I think as women and menstruators, it is really important if we can start to, like you said, really start to tune in to those inner seasons and just tune into the communication of what our body's actually saying, because it is essentially a communication system. And those hormones are so well orchestrated that every month our body knows exactly when, 14 days mid-cycle, to release an egg. And Yeah,
that's great. Thanks, Vans. I think we've got a question from Beck, so we'll acknowledge it now while I can still see it on the screen. But Beck's asked, can we actually explain the feelings on inflammation in the build-up to the bleeding phase?
Absolutely. So as we come into, when we're in our luteal phase, is that the body's, if we haven't conceived, then the body is prepping to release the endometrial lining. And so what happens is that the prostaglandins that line the endometrium here, and is it, Beck, do you get swelling in the uterus as well? Is it mainly swelling through there? That the prostaglandins become heightened in their numbers, and also too, if we have too many of them, is that then they cause a cramping and they cause an inflammatory response, which is they release the cytokines, and cytokines are inflammatory cells. And so it's really important in that time, if you are experiencing more inflammation and more swelling, the swelling can be due to a male hormone, androstenedione. And so really important just to be keeping up your fluids, and then to look at an anti-inflammatory diet. So cutting out your nightshades, because they're really impactful for creating more inflammation. And then also to increase like your broths, whether you're vegetarian, shiitake broth, or your broth, meat broth and chicken broth, to help support your gut health as well.
Yeah, awesome. Thanks, Mans, for answering that. And thanks for the question. If anyone's got any other questions, pop them in the chat. Roger that, boss. Appreciate it.
I love it.
So I kind of just want to go back to the, like we've spoken about, obviously being cyclical beings, but so how do we actually get to the point where we become more in tune with our cycles? Like, where do we start? If we're not used to tracking cycles, like, where do we start?
That's a really great, well, when we have our website, you'll be able to download your monthly report card, and that'll be a great option for you to be able to start tracking. And also too, just to download one of the period apps. There's so many great period apps. There's Flow, there's Clue, and then be able to put in what you're feeling throughout your month. And they've also too Quendo as well. They do a great one for Endo. So you can basically manage all your pain as well, and you can put in the type of pain that you're experiencing throughout the month. And it's a really comprehensive, great menstruation app as well.
Yeah, awesome. And I think you just touched on a great point. Like, it's not just about tracking your cycle, right? But all of the symptoms, all of the feelings, your moods, even putting in things around your lifestyle. If you're noticing that you're feeling more energetic and that you've had a great creative day, log that down in your diary, because you can go back and track what your cycle actually looks like for you,
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Because everything impacts us, doesn't it? Everything that we do, from our lifestyle to our nutrition to our stress levels, it all impacts our hormones.
Yeah, absolutely. We have another question that I just want to touch on while I can still see it on the screen. From Alex, is it possible to skip ovulation during some cycles?
Absolutely. So there are certain conditions, such as polycystic ovarian syndrome, which can cause an irregularity in cycles. So if you are, let's just basically break that down. So a regular cycle would be, if you were tracking your cycle, and each month, I think we touched on this last time, is that we do ovulate from different sides, our left side and our right side. So sometimes you might have a dominant side that you ovulate from, whether that's your right side or your left side. So you might start to notice a difference in the total length of your cycle. So, for example, my cycles are 28. They go between 28 days and 29 days. So an anovulatory cycle is when you're actually ovulating later in your cycle. So if, for example, if I was ovulating on day 14 every month, then I was having my 28-day cycle. And then I started ovulating later within that cycle around day 20, like I hadn't detected my ovulation. That would be an anovulatory cycle. So you actually have to release an egg to have a period, because if you're not having a period, then that would be described as amenorrhea. So that would be a time without a period, a certain 6 months. And then oligomenorrhea is you only have one period a year. So there's so much misinformation around that. And there was a really great lecture that I attended, Dr. Fiona McCulloch, and she actually specializes in polycystic ovarian syndrome. She's written 8 Steps to Reverse Your PCOS. And so she talks about anovulatory cycles. So it just means that you're actually ovulating later in your cycle So yes, if you are skipping ovulation, it just means that you might have a 56-day cycle instead of a 28-day cycle. Does that make sense, Alex?
That makes sense. It actually makes me ask you a question. So then, just to confirm, you're not ovulating. If you're tracking your cycle, right, and your cycle's every 28 days, so it goes for the duration of 28 days. So does that mean that you're not ovulating on the same day each month?
Yeah, so you
different day.
You might
Could be day
ovulate.
14.
Yeah, it could be between any range between 14 to day 16. So we always most likely normally have 12 to 14 days in our luteal phase, so after we've ovulated. So if we're actually ovulating later in our cycle, that will tell us that we have ovulatory issue that we kind of need to explore. Why is it taking so long for that follicle to grow to be a dominant follicle? And that was generally where we start to have lots of hormonal imbalances and whether there's issues with endometriosis, polycystic ovarian syndrome. So if you kind of start to see, ladies, that how crucial and key your menstrual cycle is to actually determining your gynecological health, right? And that's what T and I are so passionate about, is because the gynecological health is really overlooked in the medical field in terms of the health of our menstrual cycle. And, you know, we spend a third of our lifetime menstruating. So it's really important to start paying attention, because when we pay attention, we connect into our intuition. And then also too, we get to understand ourselves better, but on a really intimate and personal relationship. And I think that's what's so important.
Yeah, and so powerful. And man's like you touched on that. It's about our overall like gynae health, right? And I think for so long, we as menstruators have gone and had, you know, medical advice, and it's just there's band-aid solutions. And I think that's a really big thing about why we're passionate about AMP and the products that we've got at All Natural Pharmacy, because it's not actually about a band-aid solution anymore. It's getting to the root cause of any symptoms, you know, that are related to our PMS, our endo, our PCOS, and so on and so forth. So it's really important because it is about our overall gynae health, which actually is in a reflection and impacts our overall daily life.
Yes.
And you hit on it. Like you really hit on it around, you know, we become more intuitive. Then we start to actually live a lot more of a balanced, and everyone talks about flow, which is probably one of the questions that I want to end on, and I'm going to ask you in a minute. But just, you know, people throw around words all the time to do with our menstrual cycles, and sometimes we don't really know what they mean, right? And so it's important to talk. Like, I didn't know that flow was because, you're kind of in flow, in balance, right?
That's it.
So I think it's really cool for us to break down some of that terminology. I am going to ask you that. I just want to get to a couple more questions that we have here. Alex has made a comment. Bree, hi Bree. How does stress impact our cycle? And with everything going on, there's lots of women that Bree knows, including herself, that's found her cycles have changed. So how does stress impact our cycles? That's a great question. Thanks, Bree.
Thanks, Bree. Hi, how you going? Well, our hypothalamus, right, it sits up here in our brain. It basically detects what's happening in our external environment. And that information is then relayed to our internal environment. It's also through our perception of what we're seeing. That gets relayed as a neurotransmitter into the amygdala, which then goes from the hypothalamus. The hypothalamus is, okay, there's not a saber tooth, but there is COVID shit. Okay, we're in lockdown. That then gets relayed to our pituitary gland. And then we have this beautiful axis called the HPO axis, which is the hypothalamic pituitary ovarian axis. And this is essentially this beautiful orchestrated hormones that goes from hypothalamus, pituitary, ovaries. And that's what helps to regulate our cycle, produce our estrogen, follicle stimulating hormone, progesterone. So when we're in high stress, is that that function from the reptilian brain is saying to us, okay, I'm too stressed at the moment. I'm too stressed to be able to have a baby. I've got to shut down my reproductive system. And so stress then impacts those neurotransmitters and the signaling between our hypothalamus, pituitary, and ovaries, and it starts to create a disruption. And, you know, we're already living in such a high stress and there's so many demands on us these days that impacts our cycle even more. So a lot of people we've seen throughout COVID, and there's some studies coming out now to show that women's and menstruator cycles have either been lengthened in their total length. So you might notice your cycle blows out to a 35-day cycle. And then also too, your cycle may become a little bit shorter as well. So it just depends on how much stress is actually impacting. So really important to come back, so you can start to see, really important to come back to those tools of meditation, you know, having conversations to be able to release that stress, and then putting good food into your body.
Yeah, and it's interesting, right? Because we want to do the opposite. When we're in a high stress state, like my go-to is eating a burger or pizza. Like I bleed and I'm like, oh my God, give me the junkiest food ever. But actually, you notice once you start to nourish your body and do things like meditation, which you might be resistant to because you're just in a bad mood and you're feeling, you know, a little bit of PMS. Like if you actually do implement all of those tools like meditation, eating well, and looking after yourself, you find that actually does help relieve some of the stress and then in turn relieve some of the impact on your cycle as well.
Because it's also too, we're spending more time in front of our screens as well. And so we have our pineal gland here. And the pineal gland is what regulates our circadian rhythm, which is our sleep cycle. So if we're on our Zoom calls all the time, that's going to impact our circadian rhythm. So you might find that it's more difficult to get to sleep at night. Like women back in the day, they didn't have all this distraction that we did. They were just outside, you know, doing their daily chores, being in nature, connecting, and then being guided by the moon. And so that's when they would know that they were actually ovulating, because at a new moon is when we're bleeding, and then a full moon is when we're at our most fertile. And so for a lot now, like we're coming up, we're menstruating, we're having a bleed now at a new moon. And so the rays of the moon, the luminous rays of the moon, help to regulate the pineal gland. So if you can just get outside, ladies, and bathe under the moon, that it will also help to regulate your cycle. And particularly for those that have amenorrhea, missing periods, really important to get out and bathe under the luminous rays of the moon to help regulate your pineal gland, or buy your blue blockers.
Yeah. Yeah, it's actually really quite restorative when you do stop and spend time under that moon, you know, and you do feel it within you as a woman, and so connected. It's pretty incredible.
It is, isn't it?
I'm just going to get to a couple. Yeah, I'm going to get to a couple of questions. So I've got period pain in my right thigh from Tash. Have either of you ever heard of this? And I'm still to meet someone who has experienced the same thing.
Okay, so like you get pain, cramping in your right thigh. So the liver meridian starts in between our big toe. It comes up the medial aspect of our leg. It circulates around our reproductive organs and it finishes at our tissue, breasts. So the liver is really important in metabolizing estrogen. And so it's also really important for metabolizing our hormones. So if we're experiencing pain in our leg, it generally means that there's congestion through the liver. And so sometimes if you're having a heavy period, that will cause a dragging sensation. So your liver meridian it's just an indication to say, hey, your liver meridian it's blocked. It's causing a dragging and pulling sensation. So to have a look to work on your liver. So that could be implementing hot water with lemon, increasing your magnesium at that time to help to be able to metabolize your estrogen out through your bowels, increasing psyllium husk, some gentle dry brushing as well, just to get the energy through all your liver and your gallbladder meridians through your legs, and just to come into hero's pose. That's a beautiful one. Yoga to open up the front body and then just allow that energy to move through. So let us know how you go with that.
Yeah, for sure. Do keep us posted. I used to get really bad pains in the top of my thighs as well. So don't feel alone. I think that there's always, you know, a pain or a symptom that some of us have, or one of us has experienced. So you're never alone in it. But it's great to know, like, the reasoning behind it, isn't it? Because then you go,
that's
someone
it.
else has had it.
And also too, we're both.
Understand why.
Well, you've got endo as well. I have endo.
I do. Yeah.
So you find a lot of women with endo
Yeah.
do have that deep dragging sensation and pain,
Yeah.
and so really support your symptoms with supporting your liver.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm going to take a couple more questions, and then I've got one fiery one for you to finish on, man. So,
Okay, and
so
can I just also too want to say, right, after we
oh yeah, go.
ovulate, because this is really fascinating, is that the cervix closes over and basically it stops anything from coming in. So after you've ovulated, that's why it's really, like, particularly if you're on a fertility journey, it's really important not to have sex, because the body doesn't closes it up. It becomes an incubator, so it stops any bacteria from coming in, particularly like if your partner's penis is not circumcised and there's bacteria on it. So it's like the body has a natural way, stay out.
Interesting.
Come in.
I did not know that. It's like blocking it for you.
Blocks
No
it, babe.
entry.
That's why it feels tight.
Like
It feels
your
really tight. Your
personal
cervix
security
feels tight.
club.
So have a feel, ladies. Get in there.
Oh, that is awesome.
I
I
love
had
it.
no idea. But that makes so much sense.
Yeah.
Wow.
I
And so
know.
how we've got
We're amazing.
Yeah, we are amazing, aren't we? Like, not you and I, as in like beings, cyclical beings are amazing.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's incredible. Okay, question from Ro. How do you deal with endo, uterus, polyps naturally? And if, Ro in particular doesn't want surgery, how can you deal with it naturally? Great question.
It is one of those things. So I would recommend definitely womb massage. Also too, I'm just about to try one very soon, is to do some vaginal steaming as well. So you
yes.
yeah.
I've spoken about this with a lot of my friends.
I've got a friend making a box.
Awesome.
And so one of the things is the polyp can continue to grow. And it's if it starts to impact your cycle and your periods, then it's definitely worth looking at exploring to have those polyps out as well, because some of them can be cancerous as well. And I always say that any growth within our uterus, if it doesn't have to be there, it's really important to get them out. And if surgery is not your thing, it's really hard. You can't actually cure them naturally. They actually have to be removed surgically, and that's generally done through a hysteroscopy.
Yeah, that's great to know. And like, we will touch on so many more topics. Obviously, there's so much to talk about when it comes to our cycles and our wombs, and that's why we're running this Womb Talk series. So if we don't get right to the crux and the core of the answer, we will get to it in the specific kind of topic over time. One other quick question that's left that I can see is from I Am Lotus. What if I bleed on a full moon?
That is totally normal as well. We bleed from different cycles. So you might find that sometimes your cycle will lengthen out and then you flip. So you can either bleed with a new moon or bleed with a full moon. And it just means that then you're on the black moon when you're bleeding with the full moon, as opposed to the red moon. I think that's right. But
yeah,
so
we should have a whole session on actually the moon and our cycles. That'd be really fascinating.
Yeah. So it doesn't mean anything. You're still having a period, so it's great. It's just that you'll be ovulating around the new moon.
Yeah, and we've got this like 4 series, or the next 3 of this 4-part series lined up for September, but would love to hear any suggestions from all of you around other topics that you'd like to hear. I mean, we've got a plethora in our minds, but it'd be awesome to hear from you on any kind of suggestions that you might have. I want to finish just with a little bit of a banger with you, Amanda, and ask you, go back to that kind of question before, which was, we hear all these terms and that are related to our cycle, but we often don't know what any of them mean. And so I'm going to put my hand up and say, until I started working with you, I had no idea what 5th vital sign meant. And you kept saying it, and I had to keep Googling it and working out what 5th vital sign meant. So
okay.
Can we just unpack some terms that are related to our cycles that are quite common, that we start to hear or that we've heard for years, that we don't actually really know the meaning of?
Well, this is a new one because in 2015, the American Gynecology and Obstetrics Board coined the term fifth vital sign. And so our fifth vital sign relates to our period. It's our female only sign. So just like our body temperature, our respiratory rate, our heartbeat, and also there's another one I've forgotten. I've got my period. So there's 4 vital signs, and basically it means that we're alive and we're ticking along, and our period is our 5th vital sign. So it reflects not only our menstrual health, our overall health, reproductive and gynecological health. And so that's why we're really encouraging you to pay attention to your 5th vital sign and get to know your 5th vital sign and your body intimately. So you can know whether there's other things going on internally with your cycle and also with your health.
Yeah, and that's a really interesting point because it actually was only coined a few years ago. Until then, there were only 4 vital signs, right? And then they realised actually how important that aspect is and coined it as your 5th vital sign. So that's
because it's also too, being the 5th vital sign, you have to, in Chinese medicine, we look at the health of your blood, the duration of time that you're bleeding for, the color of your blood, if there's an odor, does your blood contain any clots, because that's all reflective of telling us that there's further things that we need to potentially look at, telling us on whether there's conditions such as endometriosis, adenomyosis, polycystic ovarian syndrome. So it's really getting you to become your own health advocate and investigator. Because then if you do need to go and see a health practitioner and the doctor says, oh, no, you're fine. Well, you're like, actually, no, I've got my period's a little bit irregular. I've got bloating. I've got heaviness. I have breast tenderness. My period contains clots. I've been getting pain. So you start to actually know that, and as a menstruator, we know when things don't feel right. So tapping into that intuition.
Yeah, you have a really great saying, and it's you'll see it on our website as well when we're launching this month. But get to know your flow. It's got a lot to say, and I think that that's just such a perfect, relevant point. It really does have a lot to say about our body, our intuition, our way of being.
It really does. Doesn't
Are there any cracking terms that you can think of off the top of your head that you feel like we can unpack outside of 5th vital sign? So I can't think of any off the top of my head, but if anyone's got any that they want to know the meaning of, please pop them in the chat.
Okay, it's so good to see that you've been tracking your cycle for so many years. It's props to you. Yeah. It's power to you, power to your womb. It's putting the power back to you.
We have one other question, Mans, just if you don't mind answering, but any recommendations to support the body when coming off the pill, which I'm just going to, give a little disclaimer here. We are going to do an entire session on the pill. I think it's in week 3 of this series where we're talking about understanding all kind of contraception, but please feel free and give a little top line answer if you can.
I think it's just really important to support yourself when coming off the pill hormonally. So really looking at a fine-tooth comb at your nutrition, your lifestyle factors, your exercise, and really looking at supporting your gut health as well for coming off the pill. And to work with an integrated GP or a GP that can support to help you. Important to do a pelvic ultrasound after you've had 2 regular periods to see what's going on internally. And also to run some blood tests, basically a hormone panel to see what's going on hormonally, thyroid, all those hormones, estrogen, progesterone, vitamin D, to see how your if there's any mineral deficiencies, vitamin B, because the pill essentially depletes us all of our essential minerals and destroys our gut health.
So interesting that you've just listed all of that stuff, Amanda, because if I reflect back to when I came off the pill, I just went off it, right? And didn't get any kind of external support. Didn't even know that was something that I should do. So that's a great question, Chloe, and great answer, Amanda, because that really actually helps, I think, a lot of us empower us with the right tools and resources when we're coming off any kind of contraceptive.
There's a great book called The Pill as well, and another one called Beyond the Pill. So some really great resources there if you're looking for a little bit more and you want to dive in.
Absolutely. Hey, I think we're going to wrap up tonight because we're both bleeding and would like to go and crawl into our dressing gown and go to bed. Thank you so much to everyone for joining in. Couple more housekeeping. We're running a series of these. So next Monday, the following Monday, and the following Monday after that, every Monday of September, 7:30 p.m., a different topic all around cycle awareness. Next week's topic, we're going to be talking about understanding the reproductive system.
Anatomy.
And the anatomy. And man's may come with another diagram, or she may come with a little, gadget to help us understand. Who knows what we're in for next week. But thank you so much, Amanda, for your time and for running us through that. It's just so knowledgeable and really valuable for all of us. And don't forget, everyone, that we do have the giveaway until 8:30. So get on that post, tag your friend, hashtag the product, and you could win one of our tinctures to trial. Thank you so much, everyone, for joining. It's been awesome having you. Thank you, everyone. Thanks, Amanda.
Yeah, thanks.
Get some rest, hey?
You too, beautiful. Thanks so much. Okay. Always a joy. Bye.
Absolutely. See you next week. Bye.
See you next week. Bye.
Bye.